have a question for you guys. How much is your volunteer time worth? And is it possible that federal law could actually play a key role in whether you volunteer or not? Daniel Cardinali, President and CEO of Independent Sector, to kind of guide us through these questions. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Koko. It's a delight to be with you.
Now, tell us a little bit about this Independent Sector and what you do.
Sure. Independent Sector is a membership organization of nonprofits and foundations, and we represent civil society. So there are about 1.5 million nonprofits and philanthropies across the United States, and our job is to think about partnering with them to ensure that volunteers and those people that donate and advocate on behalf of civil society have the freedom to do that in a way that enables them to put their best desires to improve community forward and help preserve the environment and drive critical social change in the United States.
Now, you have done a lot of statistics across the nation, and you can even break it down in terms of South Carolina and our volunteer hours. So in South Carolina, about how many hours do volunteers contribute in their community?
Sure. So across the United States, we are very blessed. We have about 1 in 4 Americans, or 63 million Americans every year volunteering. And South Carolina is a great example of that. In the state, there are about 1.2 million volunteers each year. And every year, Independent Sector cares about the value of this because it's meaningful, and people take their time to donate it to an organization in their community instead of going out and either doing something, a leisure activity, or earning money. There's real material value. So we work with a calculation with an economist that we've worked with for many years, and we come up with a calculation of how much each hour is worth. Now, in South Carolina, every hour donated has a value of $23.21. The good news for South Carolina is that is up about 4.5% from last year. And so when you start thinking about multiplying the 1.2 million volunteers, and they're roughly, every volunteer across the U.S. Volunteers about 52 hours over the course of the year, it really adds up to a fair amount of money. We know nationally that's about a $203 billion financial contribution volunteers are making through their time. Now, to give you kind of a very concrete example, one of our members of Independent Sector, the United Way of Greenville County, has about 13,000 volunteers. They give about 45,000 hours of service, which provides a material value to that community, about $1 million. So it's very real. Not only are people out there doing extraordinary things, kind of loving their environment and the communities in which they serve, but that is actually providing real kind of economic impact and development to the community.
Let me ask you about the mileage that you're able to take off when you are volunteering. It doesn't seem like that amount has moved much over the years. What is it, like about 12 cents per mile now?
It's actually it hasn't moved much. It's still at 14 cents per mile. Okay. And so what that means is when a volunteer makes a trip, takes food to someone who is homebound, or transports a bunch of other volunteers or young people to a community program, they are able to be reimbursed for the mileage for their activity. Now, if that was a business trip, instead of 14 cents per mile reimbursement, someone would be able to get almost 55 cents per mile. So you see, kind of a huge disparity. It's 4 times the difference. And we think at Independent Sector that should not be the case, that we should actually have the same reimbursement for a volunteer who chooses to give his or her time and use their car to do something good for the community as someone who also, works and rightfully is being reimbursed. So with that in mind, I would encourage your listeners, if they're interested, there's a way to correct for this. There's actually a bill in Congress right now that was introduced by Representative Colin Peterson. It's called the Volunteer Driver Tax Appreciation Act. That's the Volunteer Driver Tax Appreciation Act. And if they're interested in learning more about it or even letting their representatives know, they can go to our website. If you go to independentsector.org/value volunteers, that's independentsector.org/value volunteers, they can learn more about this, and also they can let their representatives know, like, look, we really want parity between business and the nonprofit community in the reimbursements.
And Daniel, why is this important?
Well, we've noticed over the last 15 years, in fact, there's some research that the Maryland Do-Good Institute has recently done that showed over the last 2 decades or so, we've seen a decline in volunteer rates among those living in the United States. It's down about 4%. And so, the Congress can certainly help encourage folks to take their time and dedicate it to their communities at a time when we are always in need of the goodwill of our fellow citizens, kind of helping support churches or food banks or youth groups or helping conserve the environment. They're just wonderful myriad ways to serve your community.
All right. Daniel Cardinali, President and CEO of the Independent Sector. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Koko. It's been a pleasure.